Betty, is it okay if I go back to Tom for that point?
Yeah.
It would seem to me, if we wanted to employ leverage, there are lots of ways to employ cheap leverage, so that in ways that are massively beyond this. So the question of whether leverage is relevant to this project or not, I find a little bit beside the point. I just wanted to make that comment.
All right. Betty?
Just a question, and I don't know if this was asked, but the service centers that we have kind of around different regions of the state, are those CalSTRS assets? Are they?
No, they're leased.
They're leased? Okay.
They're leased assets.
I'm still concerned, and not with respect to the analysis in and of itself of the proposed building, and I think, nor even with the $181 million, but it is, I think, a little absent for me of just really a forward way of looking at how our world is going to change with respect to the need for workspace, and I know that's hard to predict, and there's, especially in a world of increasing uncertainty. But I am mindful that certainly with respect to the construction of this building, the need just seemed much more clear back then with respect to bringing all of our employees out of substandard buildings. And even though the fund was pretty precariously funded at that point in time, the market returns were much higher. And I just don't want to lose sight of the fact that we're in a low return environment and probably for quite some time to come. And where we're going to be asking more, frankly, of the state and our employers and employees. And so I guess I'm of the mind that I'd like to wait a couple of years just to evaluate our funding status and our staffing space needs to see if we can become more clear about what that future looks like. And this is not at all denigrating the great work that's been done, and I really do appreciate the analysis and definitely appreciate the benefits that this building has provided in terms of the tremendous work environment and the innovative, a lot of the innovation and creativity that takes place in this building. But I think when the rest of the state is really looking, and we're all living in a world now where we're being asked to do more with less. And I just don't know that we've kind of squeezed ourselves to the point of really exploring and forcing ourselves to explore how we might be able to do our business differently going forward. So I'm going to be voting no on the motion, but definitely want to applaud the analysis that we have before us today.
So a couple of things. First of all, I think I kind of agree with Tom. I mean, there's ways to leverage this, and I think the initial analysis can probably go well beyond, do we have the authority to issue GO bonds? We have the authority to enter into leases. We have the authority to guarantee bond issues, which we've done for years and years. I'm sure there's a way we can work that out. That's beside the point right now. But we have two former investment bankers and one former bond attorney sitting up here. And if you'd like to consult with the three of us, I think we might offer some ideas. But that's not the issue right now. I want to get back to something, Jack, that you said, which is so that the initial thing would be that we would be we would be appropriating the full $185 million, but we'd be authorizing the expenditure of something like $7 million, right? So I think the question then came up, does that then mean that we can, once we've expended that money and we get to 2018, we can say, the world has changed, we don't want to go forward? And I think you were sort of suggesting, no, we don't really have that flexibility unless what happens is it comes back and the building costs $350 million. And I would like to explore that a little bit. Sure. Because I would be a lot more comfortable. I'm not sure where I'm going to come out on this yet, but I'd be a lot more comfortable if I saw that $7 million, which is 3 or 4% of the total price, as kind of an option that gives us 2 years to think about this. Right. And and therefore enables us to move forward if 2 years from now, the evidence is that we should move forward and we all get greater comfort. But if not, well, it doesn't necessarily mean we've thrown that money away. It just might mean that we wait another year or two before we go forward. I think at some point probably we're going to determine that we need to build. But that's so.
Yeah,
Can we look at it that way instead?
well, I understand, yeah, I understand that the complications, let's talk it through for a minute. A couple complications I would see, and I want to defer to the experts here too. One is, I think we would have wanted to send a pretty clear signal to the state leasing market, where there is potential pipeline here, that there is space available. And to begin working immediately with those state agencies if there's interest on that part. This would leave a very lukewarm signal that I don't think we'd get personally, I'm not sure we'd get any commitment to do that. I mean, since we know the biggest risk factor is the one you've talked about here, which is around leasing. That's what we want to work on tomorrow morning, is working. We've already, you know how vibrant this real estate market is. We've already have people in the economic development world here that want to talk to us. So those conversations wouldn't be very meaningful if we just simply said, well, we're working with our architect to design a building, and in another year we'll have a better idea. That delays that part of the market conversation which I think is significant. Also, Alan, tell me if you disagree, but at least as we did this building, it wasn't the old way of some sequential experience of just being with the architect and working through design drawings. It's now a concurrent process with the development manager, the construction firm, who are committing their resources and schedules and labor supply to a project. So I think I think in today's construction world, it's more than just let's study it and design an interesting building and then see what it costs. That's why I think we wanted to work so hard today to say this budget's pretty good, even though no one's actually drawn the building. We want you to feel so relatively confident that give or take 1%, we'd be that close in a year. So you would decide on the merits today, and we would then approach the leasing market. Flipping that all upside down, my first gut to that is increases all the risk factors more, not less. And that's why it makes it, my first reaction was, I'm not sure that's a sound approach. It wasn't that I was saying.
No, I think you make a good point. In some ways, it does exacerbate the risks we're already concerned about.
That's what worries me.
But I don't think that the issue is so much, whether it's going to be 185 million or 190 million. That's not my concern. Is more, are we going to need the space?
I hard for me to imagine a different light would be present a year from now. That was your comment. Yeah, we did ask the managers their growth perceptions, but we also scrubbed every number of every budget increase for the last 20 or 30 years. We did a top down and bottom up to come to a number, and then we peeled it back and said, we're going to grow even less. That's why if we had just used raw data, it probably would have been 4.5 across 30 years. And we said, no, let's pull this back to 2.5. Because we do think telecommuting will set in harder. We think there'll be other ways of doing work. So we spent a lot of time thinking it from top and bottom up. It was not just everyone's wish list of growth. We would never do that here.
I didn't think it was quite.
Maybe I was too, yeah. Well, that happens in business. I wouldn't say otherwise.
It does happen in business.
Yeah.
I mean,
but I think the personalities in front of me here, that's why it doesn't happen here.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, if I remember correctly, the manager's projections were lower.
They were.
Yeah.
So.
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Tom?
I didn't think I'm in the queue, but okay.
I went to previous.
once have nothing to say.
I went to previous.
I'll move you out,
I don't know if it stuck you in there or not.
Yeah.
Okay. Steve.
Yeah. Let me start by saying I'm very compelled by the analysis that has been presented by staff. I mean, I think you've done your homework to the degree that you should have. And so for that, you're to be commended. I have just a very nagging feeling here about moving forward in this environment, and the environment that not only you guys have been in, meaning the staff and the board, but also the environment you're likely to enter into in the next couple of months to the next year or so. And what that means with regard to the people that depend on you to invest their money and to do the things that you do so that they can have a very nice retirement. And that nagging feeling hasn't left me this entire discussion. So I want to make that clear, that I think, again, I'm sort of, I think where the controller is and Paul's suggestion about whether or not we're in a position to make this decision today, I question. So I'm not, as though, again, the staff work has been tremendous, but I'm just not there yet. And I don't know, on behalf of the treasurer when I will be there, but I'm just telling you, it's a feeling that I have in my gut that tells me it may not be the best time to move forward with this. So unfortunately, I will also have to, I won't be supportive. I'm inclined to abstain, but at this point, I know I won't be voting aye.
Yeah, so I guess so we've heard from a couple of members that they're not going to vote for this. So what happens if we don't?
So if there wasn't a decision to move forward with this, then we would begin looking at a short-term solution. As I said, we'll be completely out of space at the end of the fiscal year in 2019. So we would.
And you don't think there's a way to reconfigure things so that we last longer than 2019?
Well, you know what's difficult with this building, as I've mentioned before, we did optimize a few floors, but not every floor is set up the same.
Yeah.
And so there's only probably 6 floors out of the entire tower that we could optimize the same way we did before. And those floors we've actually actively optimized. Other floors are more office-centric and that sort of thing, and would require a lot more construction and demolition and all of those things to be able to optimize in that same way.
And so you would pursue a leasing option for a short period of time, for a long period of time? I mean, I think that what you're hearing is some people are saying they're not ready to move forward now, but maybe they might be ready to move forward in a couple of years. So I mean, if that's kind of the sense of the board, which is we're not ready to make a decision now, but maybe in a year or 2 or 3 years, what kind of leasing strategy would that involve?
Let me look. I actually have some information on that. So I do have information on that. And so with the current timeline, if you were to pull the trigger today, June 30th of 2020, we'd be short about 101 seats. And a year delay from that into 2021, we would need 157 seats. The delta, so I'm giving you the total number. And then a two-year delay would mean that we would need approximately 216 seats. And on average, we get about 80 people to a floor based on the building design here. So that would mean that we would need to lease space for more than 200 people.
So Alan, what would
Very first year?
If we're seeking a lease, what would that look like then? If Anna, sure.
Yeah, I mean, for that amount of space, you might be able to find something in possibly in the South Natomas market, but I would probably, for being conservative in this case, I would probably project that space being in the Highway 50 corridor.
And what would the length of what sort of leasing lengths and terms would we get?
Yeah, you might be able to find something as short as 3 years for I would call lower quality space. For nicer space, it would definitely need to be 5 years and preferably longer than that.
When you're talking about the 50 corridor, how far out?
So really, Rancho Cordova is what I would.
On the other side of Rancho or on this side of Rancho?
Probably the other side, but
So more towards Folsom?
correct.
Thank you. Paul, did you have anything?
Well, so for 216 seats, and I know we were talking about 150 square foot per person. I don't know whether that would work for the lease space, but so that's like 32,000 square feet that we would maybe need to lease for 3 years. Is that?
Well, that's just the individual seat. That doesn't include
It's usable, that's
that.
gross.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be a lot more.
it would be a lot more than that.
But I mean, even if it's 50,000, I mean, that's not an impossible I mean, there's lots of 50,000 square foot spaces available, right?
Correct, in the Highway 50 corridor, I would say yes,
Yeah.
in downtown and south
Yeah.
of Thomas, no.
Okay.
Tom? Paul, are you done?
Yeah, thanks.
Well, I understand the nature of the reservations that the electeds have and others have in this environment, and I'm wondering if there's another approach which might have a little bit more short-term expense, but to authorize beginning on the development work, which on basically a year-by-year basis, and authorize the staff to do planning as to an alternative. It doesn't seem, I mean, it seems highly likely this is the best solution over time, and it seems a shame to lose it or prejudice it for what is a lot of money in most instances, but relative to the size of this project and our resources, not. So I wonder if we could take an interim step of moving the project planning forward and also authorizing expending money to plan on an alternative with a checkpoint a year from now and a checkpoint a year after.
Well, I think it goes back to Jack's initial reaction to that and just the challenges that we may have with that as far as, finding someone or working with anybody out there that then could help us occupy our space. If it's a short-term solution that we have to think about, we definitely can do that. But from a long-term perspective, if we get a developer on board, I'm not quite sure the interest we would have with a developer to think that they're going to do this work and then again, not have.
They take a pretty long view generally.
Okay.
It's been my experience, my impression. It won't be the easiest conversation, but I think they'd rather have a project to work on someday than not, so.
Alan, how does that affect the attractiveness of the lease question? I mean, does that? I mean,
What do you mean?
Would anybody talk to us if we said we're working on designing a building, but I mean,
In terms of finding a development partner?
no, finding tenants. I mean, the issue here is I think we've some people waiting to find out if we move forward. It's hard to imagine.
So Jack, can you reiterate that? There are people that are
Well, we've inquired.
interested now,
Yeah, we've
if we
had
move forward.
inquiries. Yeah,
We already have people talking to us about leasing it, correct?
We have inquiries, yes, from one
Okay,
party in particular, but it's
And
not,
I'm sorry to
it's
cut you
no
off,
commitment, because we've not made a commitment, so
right.
I don't want to oversell this either, but it was for, a reasonably good-sized potential, so, yeah, I don't know how that message would translate then differently without authorization that we're actually doing it.
Yeah, it would be very difficult to garner tenant interest without the project being very well defined that it's moving forward. It doesn't mean, you can't garner that interest at a later point in time, but definitely tenants, without knowing the project's going to be concrete, it's going to be difficult to find that interest.
Well, if you're in the design stage now, how firm can they be? So.
I think the difference may be being in the design stage in terms of almost considering this an option. We're doing design work for the option to build the building later. To me, it's very different than, hey, we're moving forward, we're building this building, and we're in design stage.
Well, I would think you'd be able to say, this is clearly the staff and management's plan A, and that sort of thing. But anyway, I don't want to tell you how to do your job, so.
You ready, Tom?
So I would like to modify the proposal to give the staff the option to proceed that way, as opposed to saying, well, come back to us in 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah,
So now I'm going to put parliamentary snafu.
Dana, I think he can withdraw his First Amendment.
I think we put,
You're chairing. I'll be quiet.
so I'm of the belief that there's a motion out, it's been seconded, it becomes the possession of the body, and the body has to take action on it, not that it gets withdrawn.
Okay,
So
so
we could actually,
could I move to amend
someone, I don't know if you can move to amendment, someone else can definitely move to amend it. Brian, can the maker of the motion amend his motion?
No, it needs to come from someone else.
That's what I thought. So it can be, so I'd like to proceed that way.
Because it's.
If we vote on the original motion, it goes down, someone can offer another motion and take care of it that way, but I'd like to keep this as parliamentary clean as we possibly can. So Tom, are you,
Fine. however-
okay, all right. Harry. It's to you.
Okay, so appreciate the presentation, the work that has gone into the report. I actually don't see this as a green light or red light. I actually, based upon the comments and my own thought process as a result of what has been stated so far, is I would like to see a yellow light. I completely conceptually agree with the concept of the need, the intrinsic value of the project, the complexity of finding tenants, all of those issues that you will have to deal and wrestle with. Conceptually, I agree with, I think it would be a shame if we put a hard stop on this and said, we're not proceeding at all. We're not giving you any direction to move forward. I think there's some real merits to some of the concerns that have been raised. And I hadn't thought of those before the meeting, and I think there are a lot of moving parts that don't necessarily directly affect the concept of what we all, I think, would like to see happen here. But it's the nature of the complexity of the business that we have to do and the number of risks that we, some can manage directly, others that are completely outside of our control. From my perspective, based upon what I've heard so far, this adds a layer of complexity. And I like Mr. Juarez's nagging, something nagging. I have a little nagging going on too. Not to the extent that I want to see the work stop. I would love to find a way, as Mr. Unterman has stated, that authority to go forward with building ideas. This is outside my area of expertise, but the range of expenditure of authorizing 181 million and 7.5 million, it's 23 times. You know, it's a big range there. To be able to say, yeah, conceptually, we believe that there's going to be a need. The board wants to digest more of the details and let some of the other issues become clearer, we hope. We'll have more clarity, more will be revealed, less will be known perhaps, but maybe more will be revealed. And how do we give you the authorization to go forward with some design plans and bring back some maybe ideas of what the building might look like, some of the stuff that's being asked for in the recommendation without saying, yeah, you're not going to have a second chance to take a look at this. Either you give us the authorization to go full forward today, or we can't do this. I just see that as an either or, and I would like to think that there's some other approach that we can take that empowers the staff to continue to explore this, for us to deal with the moving parts that are going on here, gives you some expenditure of resources, and then gives us some time to really see how other things shake out.
Sharon?
This is hard. This is a hard one. Yeah, I would concur with, my brother Harry's comments in the sense that it's one of those things where it's like, as a teacher intellectually, everything makes it kind of makes sense. And I have so much trust for our staff. And I think the other thing that I wrestle with is with the pension solutions, which is more expensive than this. It was I mean, I know it's different, but it was kind of a no-brainer. It was a, I mean, obviously we had a lot of conversation around it and there's a lot of moving parts, but, so I think that's a struggle for me a little bit too, is it seems like there are a lot of reasons why this makes a lot of sense for us to proceed. I think, and I know we'll hear from stakeholders at some point, I think, there's obviously challenges around, changes we haven't made, for some of our, beneficiaries and, our funding status and, this. So I think that's some of maybe the craw that some of us are feeling internally, is kind of with the timing of it. There's a sense that it just doesn't quite feel 100%. And I guess the flip side of that is we've had so many conversations, chairing the investment committee, with Paul and talking to Chris. I'm really excited about internal management. I think it's going to save our beneficiaries. I mean, I think it's going to save the system a lot of money, and I actually think it's going to be an exciting new adventure for our investment staff to be managing more of our assets internally. And I really like that the investment staff is excited about staying, together, that we're CalSTRS, and whether you're an investment staff or you answer phone calls to teachers, we're a part of the same team. So anything we can do to kind of help the team stay together, I'm supportive of. So it does sort of feel like if there's some way we can, make it work so that there's clearly kind of not 100% comfort level on our board, and so we have to sort of deal with that. And if there's a way, I don't have a alternate motion, maybe Mr. Keeley or someone else more eloquent can come up with something, but I would be supportive of an alternate motion that allows us to kind of give staff direction to move forward in some way that gives us comfort in terms of the timing of when we kind of make the bigger expenditure of funds. So that's where I'm at.
Alrighty. Before I go to our next speaker, I have a question, and then perhaps Paul in here, if you'd allow me, I'd like to speak too. You have both of you in line, and I want to make sure that Michelle, if you would like to say anything, that you have the opportunity to chime in too.
Do you want me to say it now?
No. I want to offer you the opportunity.
Thank you.
Not that you have to, but I want to offer you the opportunity. I understand the optics, but how much better in 1 or 2, 5 years is that optics going to get? We're still going to have high contribution rates. We're still going to be in a low investment return environment, probably. So I guess we don't see contribution levels dropping at any time soon, correct? And Chris, we are going to be in this environment, to the best of your knowledge, for some time. So I think what the report has given us and all the work that staff has done shows us the most effective cost, the most effective use of the money of our members. This is different. The optics are different than when we built this building. We were in worse financial shape, no doubt. But everybody's in worse shape now. And I don't think there's anybody that knows how hard the contribution discussion is than the 3 people that are working in school districts that are having to pay the higher contributions. That said, I don't think we can undermine the effort if we want to move forward. If we don't either fish or cut bait now, we're gonna, and just take a look at it and possibly do it or possibly not do it in a year or two, I think we undermine our efforts to try to get that leasing income. We know we have inquiries. I think if we don't move forward, we undercut our ability to get the leasing in the terms that we want, that are most favorable to us. We lose an opportunity to have the construction resources that we might want to play with and the people that we would want to play with. I think we have an opportunity to play with financing. So it might not be as onerous as what we're projecting now. And I think we've taken a very conservative view of what our costs will actually be. I'm very comfortable moving forward. I'm really concerned of the message that we will give if we don't, not only internally, but externally. And I'm probably emotional because we're going to have to deal with the optics. The board's going to have to deal with the optics. Senior staff probably will, but it will be the board. And it's going to be hard. And it's going to be a lot harder than it was the first time. But I think we need to do it now. Paul.
Hard to follow that.
It should be easy.
I sort of look at the risk a little bit differently, because I understand what's being said. If we're not out there in the leasing market, we're going to have some risk about being able to sublet. But if we delay, and I don't think we should, I think we should give ourselves the option. But were we to decide to delay, we would be entering the leasing market as a tenant, as a lessee, knowing what our costs are. And when it comes time to build, which I think no doubt eventually will, it'll be at a point in time when we're actually leasing less space into the market, and therefore reducing our risk of not getting tenants on the terms we want. So, you know, I would like to propose some alternative motion to Tom's that, I'm not exactly sure how to put it, but I think it's kind of a dual tracking kind of thing. And it may not be the most efficient way to go about it, because we'll be pursuing one option ultimately that we don't pursue to fruition, whether that's leasing or building, but that we basically do both. We look at both simultaneously, and then we come back in a year. I don't know what I guess at least, you know, check back in a year whether it's time for a decision. But I think that's a sense I'm getting from a lot of board members that is imperfect, but we're not ready to make a decision, I think. And so we may, I think it preserves our options. I don't think it creates long-term problems for the system, even though it's imperfect to have some of our staff moved elsewhere for a while. I understand that. But so that's a motion, something to that effect.
So, Jack, Brian, you want to try to put that in terms? So, or let me.
I think.
Let me. So what you're asking for,
Yes.
Paul, is to appropriate a certain amount of money,
Yeah, the 7 million.
just the 7 million, not the 181.
Well, no, I think the 186, because we can always change that, right?
Right, so we move that into the
So we do the
building
whole, yeah, we do the whole
with
thing.
authorization to spend the 7. And go forward with the design and
Yeah,
that information, but also be taking a look at what it would cost us to put it off a year, what type of, or put it off to a time certain, a further date, and also work on what our lease options would be and what that cost would be. What the amendment would have been to the earlier
Right, right. In
motion.
other words, we would also be looking at that as an option. Now, I welcome others. I'm trying to come up with something that I think is a sense that I'm hearing from others on the board as well. So,
Right.
and I don't know whether it's satisfactory to the members who have already said that at least the original motion they would not be supporting.
Right. So Harry, or do you have wording for a motion? Okay, so then, Brian, what do you think?
I think from what I've heard, you move to appropriate the money, but you have very tight control over the spending. So you authorize a limited spend out of the account as specified, which I think certainly folks up here can sharpen their pencils and tell you exactly how much that is. And that understood, then there's the other part of Paul's motion, which was proceed down the other track, but I want to stick on this.
Right.
And then out of that, you're only authorizing a small amount out of that appropriated account.
Right. And that would be to secure development manager, the architectural firm, and general contractor to do the design work, correct, Paul?
Yeah, so that if we chose to stay on time, we could.
We would be on time.
Right, that's right.
I'm sorry, I wanted to make sure that the funding for the other track, that would not come from this account. That's what I'm trying to specify. So
Correct.
we give staff instruction to move, to do other things besides that. That would not come out of this building account.
No, I think that's understood by,
Okay.
I mean, that's how I took it. So then the motion would be to appropriate the 181 million into a building fund, authorize the fiscal year 17-18 expenditures that are scheduled to secure a development manager, architectural firm, and general contractor to complete the design. And then at the same time, outside of that building fund, to do the groundwork of what it would be to, if we decide to put it off, what moving out and having a lease for however many people that Lisa, that you guys figure out how many we would need, how much that would cost us. And then that comes back to us in a year, correct, Paul?
Yes.
That's fine.
Well-
Okay, well, I've got a whole list and they'll weigh in on it. I just want to make sure that that's what you want to have as your motion.
Yeah, that's subject to other people, yeah.
Okay, so can we,
Point on it?
Unless somebody's got.
sure.
Yeah. So I think the thing I would.
Oh, here, hang on a second, Tom.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can get you moved in there. There, go.
Clarify, to make the work on what we think ultimately will be the most attractive side in some point easier, is to clarify that the staff is authorized to provide or explore backup alternatives and use that concept as to the other work that they'd be doing.
All right,
But I think that'll be important in dealing with the developer world.
all right, so appropriate 181 million into the building fund, authorize the expenditures for fiscal year 17-18. Moving forward with a development manager, architectural firm, general contractor, and outside of that fund on a contiguous, or on a same track. Explore what other options there would, what options there would be for us if we decided not to move forward. Is that what you're?
That's the motion. Could I ask a question of Brian?
Sure.
Why do we have to appropriate the money now? If we're just doing planning work? Because my guess is part of the optical.
So Tom, I'm going to say that's pertinent to the motion.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask for a
second the
second.
motion.
Okay, so now it's been moved and seconded. Go ahead with your question.
Yeah, because I think a significant part of the question of optics over some near-term period is all of a sudden there's this $180 million appropriation, which is hard to explain because it's not funded. Is that something we have to do now when we're not actually constructing a building?
These are construction-related costs, so yes, you have to do that. You have to create the account with the appropriated funds. Again, that's why I was very clear in specifying, once the account is created, that does not mean that you've authorized the expenditure. But in order to have the account to expend even for these preliminary items, you have to take the step of appropriating the funds to create the account.
Well, but do we have to appropriate 7 million or 180? I mean, what if the design work comes in and it's 120 million?
Well, the way the statute is written, it's you appropriate the funds for the purpose of building the headquarters, establishing the account. So the interpretation is that you create the account and then you draw from the account, which is why I'm being very clear that no one gets to spend any penny of that money. And I'll let Robin jump in here, because if you're not expending it, it's a nominal account, right, Robin? It's still earning money.
Yes, so again, it's a matter of how you fund it.
It doesn't matter where it's sitting.
I was just looking for a way to not have this notional 180 million floating around as something for people to ask a lot of questions about until we know we really have a project.
I think you have answered a lot
Yeah, you
of
did.
questions in the discussion, too.
All right, Tom, you good? Harry?
I'm moving more towards being comfortable with the direction we're headed, and the reason I am is it goes beyond now conceptually, but it also puts some guardrails on what we're doing and puts some checks and balances, and it gives us some latitude. Essentially says to go forward with some designs. This is outside my area of expertise. I'll let people who are experts in real estate and development do that work. But the number that Ms. Madsen spoke about that's needed for next year is less than 10 million to do some of this work. And the 181 million, although it's a number and it's a real number, to put it in context, I know Tom knows this it's 1/10 of 1% of the assets that we have under management in a $190 billion pension fund. So yes, it is a real number, and anyone that would be critical of our work should realize, look how deliberate we are about what we're thinking about before we're saying to go forward. We're being prudent, we're being thoughtful, we're being deliberate. We're also being forward-thinking. We're saying this organization's best interest is to have this second tower at some point. But we're also saying we all have some pause. And if we didn't, I think we'd be making a big mistake. But if we said to stop, I think that would also be a mistake. So what we have found here in this compromised solution is a path forward to move forward. Maybe not as quickly as some would have liked, but certainly not putting a stop on the notion that in the best interest of CalSTRS and our members that we want to serve well into the future, a second tower at some point is needed. So I'm going to support the substitute motion, and I hope my colleagues would join me as well.
I have 4 speakers in queue. And a half an hour ago, I was really paying attention to the time. That kind of went by the wayside.
Yeah.
We have a hard stop at 1:30 for a hearing. We haven't had lunch. I have 4 speakers in line. Not that we need to stop any debate or any conversation, because this is really important. I just wanted to give you all a heads up of where we were. All right, Sharon, go.
I think I'm in support of the alternate motion. I guess it would help me to be clear, though, on what we think in a year's time, if we come back in a year and ask staff to come back in a year and say, here's where we're at, what specifically are the things or the pieces of information that we're looking for to help move us forward, I guess. That would help me to just feel better about voting for the alternate motion.
So Sharon, just so I can interject here.
Sure.
For one thing, I don't think we'll be able to get a developer on board for at least 5 or 6 months. And then the developer generally in these transactions is the one that goes out to bid for the architect and the general contractor. Conceptual design could take anywhere between a year and 18 months. So I guess that's
be a
where I'm a
couple
little
years out.
confused, is if I came back in a year, I don't know what I would have to share with you.
That's kind of what I'm getting, or I'm curious about is, I mean,
So it actually puts it, I'm
yeah,
sorry,
no, go ahead.
no, I got other people in the line.
Well, originally, we had said early 18, we would have this in a package
Right.
because we would have worked the leasing market too. I
So is
mean,
it more realistic to say in 18 months, or I guess that's what I'm trying to get at is, will we have enough?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make something work where we can have a comfort level, but also that we're giving you enough direction, so it's not just, let's wait a year and then,
Yeah.
I really don't, I think optics, I think the economy, I mean, I don't think any of those things are gonna be really that different, quite frankly, and so I guess I just wanna, anyway, we can move on to the other speakers.
So let me ask the maker of the motion. I might have put the artificial year into it. Paul, are you okay with the timeline that it was already set forward for these things to come back to us?
See, I don't think the uncertainty is the construction costs. I don't think that's what's holding us up here, is a concern about construction costs. What's holding us up here is a concern about the leasing market.
Okay,
So I think an update on the leasing market in a year.
in a year.
I mean, it could be 18 months. I mean, I'm not wed to.
So we're not tied to the year, but we would like updates as we move along
Yeah.
through that process. Ready? Harry, you seconded that. Are you good with that?
It's getting too much into the weeds.
Yeah,
And I'm afraid to
agree.
do this, but at some point I would actually like to see what the design would look like. So here's what we're talking about here are your options, and this is, if we were to move forward.
Sure,
So
and
I
that will
think
take
that's
some
real-
time.
Right, maybe
Yeah.
18 months.
Yeah.
Right, so I'll leave it to the people who have to implement
Right.
this.
We're good on the
With some
timeline.
direction, but what we're saying is to move forward with a limited expenditure of resources, and should at the appropriate time, we think it's better timing for all of us to go forward, we've already appropriated the capital to do so. Or if things go the other way, we can say, we're gonna put the brakes on this. Things have changed in a way that just aren't right. So it might not be the ideal solution, but I think it's the best solution we're gonna get to today.
Thank you.
Betty?
Thank you, Dana, and I appreciate my colleagues really deliberating on the option of being able to revisit the decision. I'm just going to say the optics is not my issue. I just think that we're going to have a discussion later on about our funding levels and risks going forward, and we're just in a world of uncertainty, heightened, and whether it's now, 2 years from now, I just don't think this is the priority that I want to place our focus on. And I think that we have a tremendous staff that's very innovative and very creative about how we deal with our workspace needs going forward. And I feel like that really hasn't been fully fleshed, and maybe we'll know more, but I feel like a lot's been kind of based on historical trends and some acknowledgement about where some of our needs might be going forward, but not really fully analyzing that. So I still will be a no vote.
So I'll just say I came to the conversation ready to support staff recommendation, and I really appreciate all of the conversation today and all the work to address the concerns that have been raised, and I really appreciate that. I most appreciate the comments of Mr. Keeley that this is really a path forward to move forward, and so I will support the motion.
All righty. So there are no longer any speakers. We do have we have a couple members from the public that have asked to speak. So Doug and, is Jennifer still with us? Okay. So come on up, Maggie. Doug, you want to take the other mic? I don't care who goes first. How's that? All righty. Maggie, you're up first.
Jennifer Baker had to leave, so Maggie Ellis, liaison from California Teachers Association. I truly appreciate the heartfelt discussion because I don't think any of us have an interest in not having our system grow and have CalSTRS staff have everything at their disposal. Optics are one thing that we do have a concern of, and yes, I don't think there's going to be a time in the next few years where anything is going to be really good looking. But from the liaisons and from our GR point of view, our priority right now needs to be the experience study and what is going to come out from that. And so this discussion, while it's much needed, I would hope that we could postpone this discussion and really focus on that experience study and what we're going to have to deal with that. Come January, when we have some idea of what's going to happen to education policy, that might have some additional impacts on us as educators and our state and who wants to come into education. We have no idea what policies are going to come out of the federal level and what impacts that will have on us as educators in our system and privatizing of public education. I think there's a lot of unknowns right now that we can't stop wheels and stop making decisions, but I think we have to do it with a little more caution and figure out what the priorities need to be right now. As a teacher who's had to teach 34 kids in a classroom of the same size that I have right now, and I'm really happy just to have 28, it may go up again sometime. So I know about crunches in space. I know about wanting less desks and smaller chairs and fewer backpacks. Sometimes we have to just buckle down and not have the best conditions in which we have to work in. But ultimately, we will make it work because that is what we do as educators, and I know that is what you guys will do as CalSTRS staff to make sure that we continue to be the best, whether we have another building in the next couple of years or not. So I just ask you to really think about where we are politically and what uncertainties we have ahead, but make some plans for that next building for the time when it's right. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Doug?
Yeah, sort of just picking up where Maggie left off. I mean, the optics are going to be very important. I'm Doug Orr, so I forgot to start with that. I teach economics and finance at City College of San Francisco. And as Maggie pointed out, you're going to have the experience study coming down very soon. And it may be that you're going to have to reduce your projected rate of return from 7.5% to 7.25% or to 7%. I don't have all of the information about the demographics of all of the members of CalSTRS and who's retired, who's coming down the pike, but I did a very quick sort of back of the envelope calculation yesterday to try to explain something to our lobbyist. And if you reduce the expected return from 7.5% to 7%, it's going to increase your apparent unfunded liability someplace between $15 and $30 billion. That's going to require an increase in the state's contribution. That's going to require another increase of all post-PEPRA teachers. And so they're going to be seeing their contributions going up even more than they were already being told it was going to go up. And the public is going to see CalSTRS with a much higher unfunded liability than they thought that they were going to see. And unless an incredibly well done PR campaign is done, the public is going to be seeing CalSTRS as incompetent. And the idea that CalSTRS is incompetent and they have this huge increase in unfunded liability, and then at the same time they're going to build a building, is just going to give a huge amount of ammunition to ex-Mayor Reed and his people who are going to increase their attack on all defined benefit pensions. And so my fear is more that, by doing this immediately, as opposed to even putting off the decision of what you're going to do until, say, your February meeting or your April meeting, is actually putting defined benefit pensions in the state of California at a pretty high risk. And so I guess my recommendation, because to me, all of the evidence is you need the building. I mean, I'm not arguing against the building. I'm arguing against the timing. And so I guess I would be arguing for putting off your decision for 1 meeting or 2 meetings until we have a better sense of what the economy is going to look like. Because as Maggie pointed out, we don't know what the economy is going to look like 6 months from now. I mean, we could be booming if Trump is actually building his wall, and that's going to employ millions of people and be using all the concrete and steel in the country to build his wall. Or we could be in another collapsed economy, and we don't know what that's going to be in 6 months. And so my suggestion is to put off your decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Alrighty, so we have a motion on the table. Jennifer, can you go ahead? Oh, go ahead, Paula.
I'm speaking today in behalf of Cal RTA and in the voice of David Walrath. We support the position of CTA, and we would hope that you use the due diligence that you have already demonstrated. And I applaud you for your very hard and thorough work and for your thoughtfulness. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Paula. All right, Jennifer, can you read us back our motion, please?
Sure, I have it as appropriating the 181 million and approving the 17-18 expenditure of the 7 million, directing staff to hire a manager architect contractor with the intent to design to build, the intent to design to an option to build, sorry, and to come back next year, or I didn't actually catch a time certain on that one.
I think we left the time certain to what the plan was originally.
Okay. And then simultaneously have staff explore backup alternatives or short-term alternatives, including costs, which would be funded from a different budget, not the 181.
And we would expect, not part of the motion, but we would expect regular check-ins on the progress of how all that's going. And
Could we take out the 17, 18, because Lisa, I think you'd probably, I think we need now is to test the market to see, is it possible to get a developer and an architect that would take it on this path.
All right.
So, I mean, that would mean we would start spending the money now.
Do we call it, okay.
It's a continuous appropriation anyway.
16, 18?
Well, it's a continuous appropriation.
Yeah, so I don't think you have to put a year on
Okay.
it. So you could just say, rounding up to 8 million, for example.
Yeah.
All right, is everyone clear what the motion is? All righty. Go ahead, Harry.
Check with our counsel. Is there anything, Mr. Bartow, that's within that motion that gives you pause, or that there's no clarity as to what we're authorizing?
The last clarification, I believe, was authorizing 8 million, because otherwise I think we were using 17, 18 as shorthand for the amount that was up there.
Correct.
So if it's a clear authorization to spend 8 million
Yes.
out of the account, and no, we have the clarity.
Paul? Harry?
Thank you.
All righty. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Nay. Any abstentions? And 1 abstention. Thank you. So motion carries. We are going to be in recess for the hearing that we are having immediately.
Whenever you're watching the clock, you start talking too fast. And part of what I was saying was that if we reduce the expected rate of return from 7.5 to 7, it's going to increase the apparent unfunded liability. Now, the general public has no idea how you calculate the future liability of a fund like CalSTRS. All they're going to see is this big increase in the number, right? And so their most likely response is that somehow the CalSTRS investment staff are incompetent because look at the damage they've done. They've increased the unfunded liability by $30 billion, right? That's the exact opposite of what is in fact going on, because the CalSTRS staff is probably one of the most competent staffs in the United States, right? But the point that I was trying to make was that it's important to realize the difference between what the public is going to understand and what everybody inside CalSTRS understands. And that's going to be the sort of the hill you have to climb in terms of the optics that you're going to have to try to deal with going forward. So I just wanted to make sure, because when I sat back down, I was thinking, you know, somebody's just watching this video, they're going to think that this professor just called the staff at CalSTRS incompetent. And that's the exact opposite of what I was trying to say. The staff at CalSTRS is incredibly competent, and I'm really, really happy they're here. And so I just wanted to clarify that.
So Doug, just for me, I knew exactly what you were talking about. So thank you very much. We appreciate you making the clarification.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. All righty, we're recessed for half an hour for lunch.